Okay, so when I say the word Antichrist, what's the first thing that pops into your head? For a lot of us, it's a pretty specific image. But what if I told you that image is actually a pretty new invention, and that its secret history completely flips the script on who or what the Antichrist was supposed to be in the first place?
Yeah, probably something like this, right? A suave, secular politician using the UN and environmentalism to take over the world. I mean, this is the kind of villain you'd expect to see in a political thriller or a Bond movie.
And this idea is huge. The Left Behind book series is where that description comes from, and it sold, get this, over 65 million copies. That's how this image of an external political bad guy got so cemented in our modern imagination.
But here's the real question. Was it always this way? Was the original idea of the Antichrist some kind of political figure? The answer is not even close. The history here reveals this really surprising, and you could even say highly strategic, transformation from an enemy inside the church to a villain far, far outside of it.
So to find the original concept, we've got to rewind. We have to go back to the source texts, back to the original language, and, well, it paints a completely different picture.
Let's just start with the word itself. In the original Greek, it's pretty fascinating. The prefix anti doesn't just mean against, like we usually think of it. It also means in place of, or a substitute for. So the danger, right from the very beginning, wasn't just about opposition. It was about usurpation, someone trying to replace Christ.
And get this, the Apostle John, the guy who actually coined the term, he wasn't pointing fingers at a Roman emperor or some big, scary outside force. No, he wrote that the many antichrists of his day went out from us, but they were not of us. You hear that? The threat was coming from inside the house.
And that idea just gets reinforced. The Apostle Paul warned about a man of sin, and where does this guy show up? Not attacking the gates from the outside, no, he sets himself up in God's temple. And for those early Christians, and later for the Reformers, the temple wasn't some stone building. It was the church itself, the community of believers. So for centuries, this idea of an internal threat is kind of simmering under the surface. But then, the Protestant Reformation hits, and boom, it absolutely explodes into a direct and really powerful accusation. You see, guys like Martin Luther and John Calvin, they saw prophecy as a map of church history. For them, these biblical warnings weren't pointing to some single dictator in the future. No, they were pointing to an entire religious system that had, over centuries, gradually corrupted the church and usurped Christ's authority from within. And listen, this wasn't some fringe idea. This was Protestant orthodoxy. It was so central that they wrote it directly into their foundational confessions of faith. So the key takeaway here is that for centuries, the Protestant understanding of the Antichrist was an internal religious usurper, not some external political one. Now, you can imagine this accusation was a devastating attack on the authority of the Roman Catholic Church. It was a theological and political bombshell, and it demanded a powerful countermove. It was like a high-stakes theological chess match. So the strategy was actually pretty brilliant. At the Council of Trent, Jesuit theologians were basically tasked with one job: come up with alternative interpretations that could defend the papacy. The goal was simple: get the papacy out of the prophetic crosshairs by moving the Antichrist anywhere else but the present. And they came up with two ingenious and totally opposite systems. A Jesuit named Ribera developed futurism, which pushed the Antichrist way out into the distant future as a single political tyrant. At the same time, another Jesuit, Alcazar, developed preterism, which put him way in the distant past as the Emperor Nero. Two completely different theories, right? But both achieved the exact same goal. They got the present-day papacy out of the hot seat. So here's where it gets really wild. How did a counter-reformation idea, an idea designed specifically to defend the papacy, end up becoming the dominant view in Protestantism today? How did that great switch happen? Well, it was a slow burn, taking about 400 years. That futurist idea was gradually picked up, first by some influential Anglicans. Then it got supercharged in America by a new theology called dispensationalism. And finally, pop culture took it and ran with it, cementing it in pretty much everyone's mind. The real key, the theological move that sealed the deal, was the idea of the rapture. Think about it. If you believe the true church gets suddenly taken off the earth before the Antichrist even shows up,
Well, then, by definition, he can't possibly come from inside it, right? The church is gone. The threat has to be external and political. And just like that, the transformation was complete.
So this massive shift from an internal enemy to an external one had some really profound consequences, consequences that reach all the way into today.
Remember that old confession we talked about? Well, as the push for Christian unity grew in the 20th century, that language became kind of inconvenient. So many Protestant denominations just officially removed it. They went into their own historic documents and effectively erased the original doctrine to foster better relations. And what this did, as the source argues, is it fundamentally altered the church's threat perception matrix. All that vigilance that was once pointed inward, at doctrinal purity, at the integrity of its own institutions, it all got redirected outward. The focus shifted to geopolitics, the United Nations, global economics, and secular leaders. And this whole history leaves us with a pretty provocative question. By externalizing its greatest adversary, by turning its gaze from the mirror to the window, has modern Christianity maybe, just maybe, accidentally left the door wide open to the very internal corruption it was originally and most explicitly warned about?